What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for stopping by. I'm Jeremy, and movies are terrible. This is another special episode of the Weekly Pop where I am joined with fellow YouTube content creator, movie reviewer, and just all around good guy, Caleb. What's up? This is Caleb of Caleb Says Stuff. Welcome back, buddy.
Hey man, thanks for having me back. I know she got the facial hair. It looks good, man.
Trying to catch up with you. You got a nice little beard going.
It used to be down to here. I used to have like a Gimli thing and I shaved it off.
Did you? I've never grown it out, Pat. Like this I got that fucked up beard that never grows in full, so I just gotta like
So
grow
I
it out enough to look cool.
grow right here. It's that Spanish blood in me, that Spaniard blood. I don't grow here, so I could do this real long if I wanted to. But like, I grow everywhere else. It's real thick.
So I went and saw The Shape of Water. I think a couple days after you did, maybe even quite a bit longer than that. I saw it on Tuesday, last Tuesday, so a week from the time of recording this, and I'm a huge Guillermo del Toro fan, and this is the one that he seems to be getting the most critical response from. People are really lobbying that this could potentially win a bunch of stuff at the Oscars, and it got me thinking about del Toro's kind of entire body of work, and so we wanted to have a conversation about that. And with that, we'll start there, and then we'll get into the weird shit. But Caleb, you saw The Shape of Water. How did it hit you, man? Like, what was the experience like for you?
So I've always been one of those people with Guillermo del Toro. I've always liked his visual style more than I've actually enjoyed his movies. I was one of those people who like I imported at the time Pan's Labyrinth. Beautiful film, but didn't connect with me quite the way everybody else did. This was the first Guillermo del Toro film that I think really connected with me on a bigger level than just a visual level. That being said, it is a weird movie. There's a couple of parts in it that almost pulled me out, but once I kind of just let that go and went along for the ride, I actually really enjoyed it. Visually, I thought the theme of like teal being out and the color palette he chose was just absolutely beautiful. It is a bizarre film, and I love when movies like this are getting so much press because this is definitely not a traditional blockbuster in any way, shape, or form. And it's nice that it's getting a lot of critical acclaim, but it seems to be like it's performing pretty well too. So I'm really happy to see that.
Yeah, it's funny because a movie like Beauty and the Beast comes out literally just a couple months ago, and it's a beloved classic fairy tale fable. It's been told dozens of different times in different mediums. Ron Perlman, who played Hellboy, played Beast in like a 1980s
That
series.
was like my mom's favorite show growing up. I've seen like every episode of that.
And in our minds, because you never had to see the love making, the actual physical sex, it's easier to digest. And that's something that I think will divide general audiences when it comes to The Shape of Water. I agree with you in the fact that like this is brilliant filmmaking from a technical perspective. The cinematographer, whoever it was, needs to be commended. Like just the the dreamlike quality that this movie has, and you touching on the teals and the blues and the way that color is used in it. It is all very intentional and by design. And I like the parable, right? It's 1950s or maybe early 1960s where there's a huge competition between the US and Russia. This is like the beginning of the Cold War. And we are introduced to a cast of what you would consider kind of outsiders at that time, when the white male and the nuclear family were kind of seen as, the desirable, the right way. And then we're introduced to a mute character played by Sally Hawkins, who does a fantastic job.
She is brilliant in it.
So good, so good. We've got Octavia Spencer, who's a black woman, not very noteworthy now, but at the time, again, these are people that kind of had the deck stacked against them. Richard Jenkins, one of my all-time favorite character actors, never seen that dude in a bad performance, and he plays her gay neighbor. And so it's kind of a story about outcasts and the way that they, the relationships between each other, kind of give them or some sort of connection within a world that really just kind of overlooks them. And that is on a kind of more, like I said, more the parable, more the subtext of the movie. What happens is they work at an underground research facility for the military. They acquire what they call the asset. It's the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's a
yeah, that's all it is.
That they pull out of the Amazon River. Sally Hawkins, as a mute, forms a bond with this creature who's being abused and experimented on horribly, and the two of them form an unlikely bond. We are going to talk about this movie as if you've seen it. That said, if you know the premise and the comparisons to Beauty and the Beast, you know where this is. You know where this is going. You essentially know how it's going to play out because we've seen it before, and I think that was very much by design. And that's another thing that I just love about Guillermo del Toro is his affection for these old school creature features and monster movies. So I kind of just wanted to ask you, like, on that level, did you ever explore a lot of the Universal monster movies?
So I'm a huge fan of the original ones. Preacher from the Black Lagoon, I liked. Wolfman is actually my favorite horror film of all time, the Lon Chaney Jr. original. Yeah, I absolutely love that movie. I like that one. When they brought him back, I thought it kind of went to shit a little bit, but the beginning of that, and I loved how they paid homage to this without beating you over the head with it too much. It definitely much had that Beauty and the Beast mixed with the Universal monsters, and even like with the outcasts of society. I thought that was handled so eloquently. As the gay neighbor, I thought was actually handled wonderfully. I kind of hate when it's beaten over your head with it, and I like when it's done more as like a matter of fact thing, like, oh, he's gay, and that's not really a huge defining moment of his character, even though that is a catalyst for why he wants to help the monster. But I love movies that do that, and to me, when you don't beat it as much, it's actually more quote unquote progressive and forward thinking than when you let their sexuality or their race be the defining moment of their character, their defining characteristic. And I felt like these characters, the gay guy, the black girl, those were not their defining characteristics. They were just characteristics that had marginal, tiny effects on who they were as a character. And I thought that was handled so wonderful that I didn't feel like any of them were caricatures. Because a lot of times I see when people are trying to kind of get a message across, they turn them down into dumbed down caricatures of a certain thing. And I thought Guillermo del Toro handled all that so wonderfully. And the drawing from the original monster films it's hard for me to pass up as a diehard Universal monster film. I mean, I even love Abbott and Costello meets all the Universal monsters. So
yeah, when it totally fucking went off the deep end.
No, yeah.
Universal ones as well. And man, you put that really well. I was there was a point in the movie when I realized, like, wow, they haven't came out and said that Richard, I apologize, I can't think of the character's name, but they hadn't come out and said, this is a gay man. You learn it through the development of the character. And like you said, I mean, that's just really well put. It's not what defines them in this film. They are not just reduced or relegated to these roles. And Sally Hawkins, again, just back to that performance, how she's able to portray so much, non-verbally and on a technical perspective for an actress or an actor or, anybody to be able to go in and express a massive array of emotions and not even internalizing it. Like there's not that a lot of times they use the device of you can hear inside the character's head, like a narrator or whatever. And they don't cop out with any of that. It's just this really small, contained story. And at its essence, it's a love story. And I think very much the message to glean from it is that, like, love is blind, love shows no boundaries, and it's not necessarily something that you can fit into this box, because Michael Shannon's character, who is the bad guy, absolutely unequivocally the bad guy in the movie, has that perfect nuclear family. Is that something that you picked up on when you were watching it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This thing definitely does have a political lean to it, but I thought it was handled so masterfully. And Sally Dawkins, I think she has probably the best monologue I've ever seen in a movie, while doing it through sign language, and it's the scene where she's talking about being an it, and she's making him repeat the words back to her. That is probably my favorite self-contained scene of like 2017. I was just so blown away by that little bit of a scene that she really sold that movie. They all did. It was one of those well-acted movies, and the bad guy I thought was wonderful. And I thought they did a thing where it was a commentary a little bit on today, but it was more a commentary on a time instead of throwing in people's face and trying to make them feel guilty. It did a commentary on a time when this was a real problem. Not that we don't have problems now, but like a concrete, quantifiable problem. And by doing that, it kind of pointed to the ridiculousness of racism, sexism, homophobia, and I thought that was such a smart way to do it. And I think Guillermo del Toro really deserved the Golden Globe that he got for Best Director. I thought he was brilliant for the way he handled all the subject matter.
Just hearing him do that speech, that like it moved me because genre just gets overlooked all the fucking time. Blade Runner didn't win anything, and it's like, what kind of crazy world do we live in? But then to see somebody like Del Toro actually get the the acknowledgement for what he did, because this guy's been doing his work for 25 years. He plays in these two very distinct wheelhouses where he'll handle $150 million American produced film, and he finances these little more independent films. And these are the ones that are my favorite. There's Kronos was the first one. It was followed by The Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth. Crimson Peak kind of is like right in the middle of his big budget movies and then his independent films, and then now The Shape of Water. And I really like The Shape of Water. There was like when you said that was one of your favorite scenes, that was, I mean, such a good scene. And then there was a couple other just smaller moments in it where like her and Richard Jenkins' characters are emulating the dance steps to whatever musical that they're watching on the television, and it's just the choreography with their feet and just the way the characters bond. It actually it resonated with me in a real way.
One thing that I thought, another thing that he did really, really well, and this is a hard thing to do, it was like jovial and fun while at the same time being depressing and sad. It was dark and gloomy at the same time of being uplifting, charming, and beautiful. And you would be watching a scene and it would have both those elements running side by side, running parallel to each other. And I don't know how you do that as a director to the extent that he did. There was almost this like Hayao Miyazaki modern fairy tale element to it, kind of like Lady in the Water, but like a much better film than Lady in the Water. But like that type of movie, and it was just, I can't rave enough about it. And it's one of those movies that, as I went back and thought about it, I actually enjoyed it more. The more I think about this movie, the more I enjoy it. Where my first take, because of the weirdness of it, I was like, yeah, it's a good movie. It's definitely one of the better. And then I thought about it more. And to me, that's the stamp of a good movie when you think about it weeks after seeing it.
So we have kind of tiptoed around the thing that makes it going to be a little bit more difficult to digest for normal audiences. And that is, in The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the creature loves the woman. In King Kong, the creature loves the woman. Maybe even the woman, connects with him emotionally, becomes friends with him or whatever. But there's always been an unrequited love between the monster and, the object of his affection. Where in this movie, they actually go all the way. And not only does it imply that Sally Hawkins' character has sex with the fish man, but there's two scenes in it, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes of screen time dedicated to her getting it on with this fish man. And how did you respond to that in the theater?
Instantly, as soon as I saw it, honestly, I totally had a general audience reaction. Like, it took me out for a second. Like, I was like, ooh, I don't know, you pushed it a little too far. In fact, sometimes I hate when there's a romantic element. Sometimes I think stories are more powerful when they're about friendship or about a connection. And in fact, the relationship between her and the fish man, I found less interesting than the relationship between her and her neighbor. I think that's a much stronger, more interesting relationship personally, because not every movie has to be about romance. But once I kind of got over that and was like, okay, the time feels like an it. She's a quote unquote freak at the time. And it made a lot more sense with her motivations. And it's weird, it's bizarre. It's definitely, I would say, even bestiality, because he's more beast than human at this in this thing. He's not even like Beauty and the Beast, where he feels human. No, he feels like a monster. But I kind of like Guillermo del Toro for having the balls to actually go that far with it, because I don't feel like a lot of people would have done it. If I was directing, I don't know if I would have the balls to do that, because that seems like something that could tank your entire film and have everyone hate it.
Dude, I agree with you 100%. At the moment that it was happening, I was a little bit taken aback by it. Looking back, I was like, man, they could have implied it. They could have cut back in 2 minutes in a scene, and it would have still conveyed the same message. However, it wouldn't have risked isolating people. But like you said, I props to the guy, because as somebody who always did love monster movies, he wanted to see what that real relationship would be, and so he gave the monster a chance to get the love back that they've always given for decades. So props to him for that. Props to whoever distributed the movie, that the producers weren't like, great movie, that shit's got to go. And that's something.
Oh yeah, I'm shocked that wasn't cut out of the script as soon as it came up. Like I blows my mind that wasn't cut.
Right, and Del Toro, and you touched on it a minute ago. Like, he's this guy who's able to have this whimsy and childlike wonder, and almost through the perspective of a child's eyes at one time. And then he also contrasts this with this really stark, brutal violence, and this one didn't have the very defining scene that something like Pan's Labyrinth did, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But the scene where dude's dead rotted fingers are about to come off, and he ends up ripping that shit off in front of it, I was like, this is the same movie? It's so crazy, the tonal shifts,
Oh yeah, that movie jumps around from like 5 different tones within like 5 minutes, and normally that can pull me out of a movie, because I think if you do it too much in comedy, it pulls away all of the emotional resonance, and you never really get to become attached. But I feel like he managed to walk up to the line of gore and back off. He managed to walk up to the line of comedy and back off. He managed to walk up to the line of even the weird sexual stuff and then back off. And I think he handled it all so perfect, where it was all up to the line, but I never felt like anything really jumped it in a substantial way. Maybe the fish sex, pulled it a little farther, but even that, like once you got used to it, that was the only part. He didn't dive too far into it.
And it's not explicit. We shouldn't oversell the fact it's not like a fucking porno or an NC-17 kind of sex. Just
yeah, it's not those Japanese videos you see with like a girl shoving like an octopus in her. It's nothing like that.
Unfortunately, no. Yeah,
0 out of 10.
Question. Not even rating the movie, but just on a viewing experience, did you feel you said that you felt the connection between Jenkins' characters and Hawkins' characters. Did you feel an emotional, what am I trying to say? Were you manipulated emotionally to the point that you felt that the movie succeeded in the love story?
Yes, I actually do. I thought they could have pushed the love element a little bit more before they jumped to some things. But overall, like by the end of it, you do feel that she does have this connection with him. And I feel like by the end of the film, with the way it ends, I do feel like they are these like weird soulmate characters that don't make any sense. And I felt it was really expertly handled, especially, okay, the end. I actually haven't talked about this with anyone. I've been curious to get another person's take. So the way I read the movie, since we're doing it spoilers anyway, is at the end, I actually read it as the mute girl dies. He doesn't actually save her. So I read it as, he's telling the story. And he's like, this is how I like to think it happened. I like to think he carried her down and they lived it happily ever after. I know my wife read it much more literal. She read it as, no, he does save her. They live happily ever after. I didn't know how you thought about that.
Have you seen Pan's Labyrinth? I dropped you for a second.
Yes.
Nodded your head yes. Okay, do you remember the ending of Pan's Labyrinth?
Yeah, absolutely. Where it's like, is it real or is it fake? Does she live?
I agree. I mean, I think that's kind of, I think it's up to your wife. I think it's up to you. I think it's up to me to decide. I agree with you 100%. I think that the introduction and the monologue that Richard Jenkins' character gave very much indicated that this is just a version of the truth, and that it's not actually necessarily all the way that things happened, because there are elements in the movie that they're just more surrealist, like that beautiful imagery of the bathroom being able to be completely filled with water. The one of my favorite things about it, and then we'll move on, but the fact that she lived above the Orpheum, and the scene when she's looking for Gilman, and she goes down into the theater and she just sees him like transfixed watching a movie. That was like just meta amazingness to me. Did you like that part?
Oh, that scene, and then the way it's shot too, like with the bright screen and almost the silhouette from the back. As soon as that scene, it's like even now it gives me goosebumps talking about it. It was so beautiful of a scene. It's such a weird movie that it shouldn't be as beautiful as it is. It should have. I feel like I should almost not like this movie. It should feel almost weird and perverse in not a good way, and it doesn't. And I feel like that is blown away. And that scene in particular, where she walks in and he's just standing there transfixed on the movie, like you said, it's so meta, but it's just such a wonderfully shot scene.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I back to the question I asked you. I feel things that I loved about this movie. I did feel like there needed to be a little bit more of a courting phase. I like the egg parts. I liked her bringing in the vinyl and the record player and all of that, but I felt like it would have taken another, I can't say how many minutes, but I could have handled another scene of like that kind of, because she immediately has a bond with him. It takes him a minute to warm up to her, but it seems like she was all about it from the beginning.
Oh no,
So
no, she wanted something pretty much off the beginning, and I do agree. If you would have built that a little bit longer, I don't think that scene would have been so jarring to where like it pulled me out for a moment. I think had we actually just built it just a little bit more, I think that I wouldn't even have any adverse reaction even for a second. But I wonder if I didn't have an adverse reaction at all, if it would have even stayed with me at all.
yeah, yeah, in a lot of ways. And my wife is not somebody who I would consider. She's kind of the litmus test for, is this a movie that just regular people are gonna like? And she didn't seem bothered by it, which is cool. The one thing that she mentioned to me after the film was over is it's like Amelie, and I swear to God that crossed my mind within the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I would have never even made that connection, like, and my wife's the same way. Like, my wife is not a film buff. She's gotten more over the years, but she's kind of the test, I agree, of like general audiences. And I think my wife even liked it more than I did. She walked out and she was like blown away by it.
Awesome.
And that to me was more shocking for this bizarre of a film, for my wife to walk away and go, wow, like she hated Jumanji and she loved this. I'm like, maybe I am getting through to her a little bit.
How was Jumanji? Did you catch that?
There.
How was Jumanji?
I didn't like it. It was a dumb slapstick comedy. It kind of lacked all the heart of the original. Not that I'm a huge fan of the original, but the original actually had some heart to it. And this was definitely none of that. It was slapsticky, Dumb and Dumber style comedy.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard people enjoyed it. I'll check it out when it comes out to rent. But so all this conversation about the monster human relationship in this film, first, and not to like, not in a homoerotic kind of way, when you looked at the Gill Man, could you see what she saw in him?
No, I actually thought it was too monsterish. Like I couldn't see what she saw, and I kind of like that. Like that, maybe I think that almost made it more powerful instead of making him like an attractive looking Gilman. No, he looks like a fish,
Yeah,
and he's kind of creepy, and he looks like Creature from the Black Lagoon. In fact, he looks like the Ape Sapien from Hellboy, but Ape Sapien's like a more man looking, like attractive version. They actually made him uglier than that character.
funny that you said that. That's what I was thinking. If they would have used Abe Sapien I would have probably like I could see that because he's more streamlined. He's not covered in scales and gills and shit, but it's very much similar characters. So there is a comparison to be made. But that's kind of what I was wondering, because sometimes you see, and we're about to get into a whole fucking list of it, but sometimes you see non-human characters and there is still a sexuality about them. There is still some sort of features that you can glom onto and be like, it's human enough, I guess. And I didn't feel that with The Shape of Water. So I was just curious. I'd love to hear a female perspective on this if you actually saw the movie The Shape of Water. And I'm not asking if you thought they were hot, but just is there something that you could connect to attraction wise? Leave that in the comments section, because I would love to make fun of you about it. No, just kidding. You'll have plenty of ammunition to make fun of me about here in just a moment. So in honor of The Shape of Water, we're talking about some weird creatures, aliens, robots, monsters, anything. You can go as far outside the box as you want to. I don't feel like we should throw cartoon characters in there, because then we could be here for like 6 weeks. But I'll throw one out, just starting off. The Bride from The Bride of Frankenstein. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I don't know, man. That hair is a little too Marge Simpson for me. I don't know. I mean, but I have worse stuff on there that I would say yes to, but I'd probably do. I mean, at the end of the day, probably thumbs up. I mean, I'm a guy, but
the hair, like the deaf girl can, or the mute girl at the gills, and you're having a hard time with the tall hair. Yeah, I thought she was kind of a cheat because she's not crazy enough. Of course, I would smash. What do you got? One at me.
So my first one, because I totally didn't go like humanoid at all, because I think that's, like you said, kind of cheap. The creature from Splice. Do you remember the movie Splice? Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, something like that. The creature from Splice, where she keeps transforming and she has that sex scene with the wings. There's something like her eyes are too far apart, but there's something still sexy about her.
Yeah, until she turns into a dude and fucks you at the end.
No, well, you could fuck her as a woman, and then she turns into a dude, and you can play video games. Sounds like perfect.
That I was so on board of that movie until that last part, and I was just like, "What happened?" It didn't ruin the movie, but man, it was just weird.
That movie's a weird movie anyway. Like I didn't necessarily like it, but it's a bizarre film.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Throwing one at you. This is even more of a cheat. Yeah, this is the cheats. Scarlett Johansson from The Skin I'm In. Or this.
Oh, of course, it's Scarlett Johansson.
Under the Skin. Yeah. That's not even fair.
Yeah, like
so technicality.
So my next one would be I think they're called the Na'vi, the from Avatar.
Yeah.
Yeah. That feline, tall, skinny body thing kind of worked for me.
Yeah. And on that same note, we have a lovely friend in the Facebook group #TeamTerrible. Her name is Bobby Jo Elson, and she put Jake from Avatar, the male version of the Na'vi, which I thought was brave. I'm going to go ahead and go through you guys' list here in just a minute. We'll get to that, but I'm going to toss out my next one, and then I'm going to let Caleb toss out one more, and we'll start looking at those. Okay, so after my first two, which are cheats, and these are not ranked, by the way. I haven't really sat and thought about fictional alien characters and how I would rank them, but Return of the Jedi, Jabba's slave Ula.
That was actually on the list as well. Yeah, especially like because you know how they filmed it and then they filmed the reshoots later, and it was the same actress and she still was hot. Like, no, there's always when those scenes when they went back where she actually falls. I guess the girl was a dancer, and so she like was in incredible shape 20 years later when they reshot the stuff. So it's actually the same actress in both scenes.
That's awesome.
So
he's got that little mesh getup on too. It's pretty racist.
Yeah.
Star Wars.
I'm all about it, man.
What else you got?
The next one would be, did you see Valerian? The opening scene of the Alien.
I haven't, but I had somebody mention that. I should look up a picture real quick.
Yeah, pull up a picture of her. They're kind of like this, like racially ambiguous, like perfect being that's bald. They look like Jessica Alba, but bald, essentially.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm with that. Let's see. Alien and yes, I'm familiar with the seeing them in the trailers. Yeah,
Even the men in that movie are pretty. Like they're all just ambiguous in every sort of way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and all the what's her name's not too bad on the eyes either. Cara Delevingne. Think she's an alien right now.
I don't know. Those eyebrows are probably alien.
Out of this world, bro. Let's see. I'm trying to pull up a Facebook page so I can call out a couple of my friends. Okay. My friend Vincent Landreth. He says Donkey knows what's up, and he's got the picture of Donkey from Shrek with that big red dragon. You know what I'm talking about?
The red dragon? That's a thumbs up for me just because I got to see how that works.
My buddy Paul underneath, he said, to be honest, she's thick. All right. Okay, this veers into the cartoon character thing, and that's a whole separate video, but Jessica Rabbit, duh.
Of course. If we're going cartoons and we're going aliens, Leela from Futurama too, totally.
Let's see. Scarlett Johansson voice from her again, kind of hitting in that gray area of does this count? But then my buddy Paul Sackman says he has a sickeningly long list, and then he put a picture of the Queen xenomorph. That just seems all sorts of disturbing.
That seems intimidating. I don't know if I'm ready for a queen.
Oh, the fuck is wrong with you, bro?
I don't know, like the backside on that thing. You see that thing?
Yeah, the whole anatomy thing is just not jiving there. Let's see.
What about the brain slug from Starship Troopers? It just looks like a giant vagina anyway.
Yeah, dude, just dive in head first. Just
dive. It looks like a fat girl vagina, like has a fupa. I'm all about it. Queen fupa.
So bad, and definitely the underside of a face hugger looks like a sniz.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of in sci-fi, a lot of stuff that looks a little like vaginas in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alien in particular, that whole franchise is full of just the most Freudian sexual imagery of anything. Xenomorphs' heads look like penises, like just top to bottom. That movie's full of sex parts. Let's see. Kyle Warner doesn't have. Halo Flood Abomination. I guess that's a gaming thing. You familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Flood. I don't know if you know how that works. That's pretty intimidating. It's like a weird zombie mutant tentacle thing. Yeah.
What the fuck is that? That's yeah. I mean, why not? And then somebody showed one from Halo. It's a kind of cool looking. Let's see.
Was it Cortana, the blue one?
Yes. Yep, that's who it is.
Yep.
He put it on there. Is she a playable character? Is she somebody that shows up in the storyline?
She's in the story. She's essentially an AI unit that's in your suit.
I know nothing about Halo. That's sad. I mean, what, Red versus Blue's been out for like 20 fucking years now.
I know. I haven't played a Halo in years.
I know me and you are both on the same, obviously Nebula and Gamora, right?
So Zoe Saldana, I know she's like objectively pretty. She doesn't really do much for me, which is ironic. People always say my wife looks like Zoe Saldana. To me, she doesn't. I think it might be one of those things where it's like, oh, she's black, so she looks like Zoe Saldana. But I never thought was hot until I saw her in green makeup. And then apparently, if I could have Gamora or actually the actress, Gamora all day.
So what about Nebula, man? Did she do it for you even with all that crazy robot shit?
No, she's a little too much for me. I don't know. It's also the evil thing. I don't like bitchy girls in general, so an evil girl, I don't know if I could handle all of that.
No, she's into that Dom shit. No question about it. So that was from my buddy Rodney, said Nebula. Ian Solent another friend of mine. I don't know who this is. She looks like she must be a Final Fantasy character because it says Square Enix down there. Do you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. Some sort of Final Fantasy character. I don't know, but yeah, of course, it's a bunny woman. That's like a Playboy bunny with a bow and arrow. I'm about it.
This is the most worthless podcast that I've ever done, and I love it. My buddy Ivan says Vincent Valentine is like Edward Cullen for gamers, so I'm assuming he must be from Resident Evil, or is he from Castlevania? It's got to be Castlevania.
I think he's Final Fantasy. I don't know. Maybe he looks like or Kingdom Hearts or something.
What he doesn't look like is anything other than a human being. So, Ivan, I love you. Thank you for your contribution. We need you to think a little bit further outside the box, sir. I want to see some weird tentacled. I don't know what. So, yeah, that's a couple that came up in the conversation. And there are tons of other ones. I probably got a couple of other ones I could throw out at you real quick. Caleb, you got one?
I'm talking in Mystique form in the movie, like when she's all blue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'll take young Mystique, old Mystique, any of them.
Yeah, we got a little crossover there as well, of course. And then kind of like Zoe Saldana, Sofia Boutella is another one of these actresses that has made for some pretty sexy alien / mummies, you know, because she was the mummy in the last movie. And then also Star Trek Beyond, she played that white-faced alien.
She was in that. I forgot that was her in it. Yeah. No. Oh yeah. No. She looks good as a person and as an alien.
Yeah, for sure.
And as a mummy.
I'm a mummy's boy. All right, we're done here. No, I'm just kidding.
How about okay, the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, his wife, Burton's wife in Planet of the Apes. Ironically, another girl that looks prettier as a monkey. When you see her as a monkey, you're like, oh, she must be a really pretty actress. And then you see the actress, and it's a little bit of a letdown. But
we're sorry, Helena Bonham Carter. If you're watching this episode of the show, you're one of 14 people. Congratulations. I figured just to be fair, honorable mention. Give me a break. Henry Cavill is Superman. What? And he's an alien.
I almost went Supergirl. I was like, Supergirl's a cop out.
yeah, I guess Supergirl's a cop out. Let's see. Martian Manhunter, no. I'm trying to think real quick before we move on if there are any obvious ones that I missed. I thought about the opera singer from The Fifth Element.
I thought about that too. Yeah, because there's something weirdly sexual about her. And then if we're going Fifth Element, Lilu, of course, even though it's a cop out.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Some pretty mundane or pretty interesting, but invaluable, not valuable information that you guys are getting right here. That's why we call this They're Terrible, because. So real quick before we move on and before we wrap this thing up, let's switch gears into something not fun. Our boy Aziz Ansari is in the news today. There was a piece written by New York Times, which is the one that I was going by, but I got a little bit of context from you, Caleb. Will you tell me just the overview of what happened?
Yeah, so I guess a girl who went on a date with Aziz Ansari went to babe.net, some random website, and that's where she told her like 4-page story on it. So essentially what happens is she meets Aziz at a party. He's taking a picture with like an old model camera. She walks up to him and pursues him. He actually shuts her down. She leaves. Then she comes up again to pursue him, and she then points out that they're using the same camera. They exchange numbers. They text for a couple days. They decide to go on a date. At the date, they go to dinner. They have a glass of wine, all this stuff. They go back to his hotel. Back to his apartment, and she compliments the marble countertops. So he invites her to sit on the marble countertop. They start making out. He starts going down on her, and then they make out some more. She talks about he keeps grabbing her hand and pulling it toward his penis. Then she performs oral sex on him. They kind of stop for a bit because she appears to be uncomfortable. They move to the couch, make out some more. She performs oral sex on him again a second time. he does sound like he's being pushy. Like I don't want to say he doesn't sound like him. If I were in the situation, her side, but if I were in the situation, it sounds like I would have backed off. It does seem very pushy. It seems like almost like a teenager would be, not like a grown adult. But they go into his bedroom. They start just kind of like grinding on each other in front of a mirror. Apparently, she said she looked out of it. They watch some Seinfeld. They make out some more. He keeps fingering her, and then eventually gets to a point where she actually does say, like, no, I'm uncomfortable, we need to stop, and she does appear. So at that point she gets in an Uber. I believe he called her the Uber, and they send her home. The next day he texts her and he's like, hey, I hope your art exhibit's going good, because he doesn't seem, from the text and everything, he honestly does seem to think it was a normal sexual interaction, and she doesn't. And they're now calling this at least sexual misconduct. I've heard sexual assault. I've even heard Aziz Ansari be called a rapist. I think what he did was pretty creepy, pretty scummy, pretty presumptuous. As far as I know, I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know his side of the story. He actually released a statement now, and he said it was all news to him. It was completely consensual. He didn't know anything was even wrong until the next day. I for me feel like, yeah, I absolutely, of course, one rape is way too many rapes. I mean, one assault is too many assaults. I think we need to quantify what is truly assault and what isn't, because this does sound very much like two people misinterpreting a situation, and now one of them is being called, at least a sexual deviant of some sort, or up to potentially a rapist. I don't know. The way I read it was, yeah, pushy, not rape. That he really, she seemed like she kept saying she gave nonverbal cues. I'm going to tell this for everybody out there. Men suck at nonverbal cues, even with other men. In normal conversation, we don't do well with nonverbal cues. So actually gave a verbal cue. He did appear to back off. And I don't know. I know you haven't read up on it, but I don't know what your feelings are as far as like the Me Too or the your time's up movement that they're calling it, the Golden Globes.
Yeah, I have no choice but to have been reading up on all of this for the past, several months. And no, it's new to me. I had a coworker tell me on the way home, "Oh, did you hear Aziz Ansari has been pulled into this?" There is no objective right and wrong in these situations, and that's what I take that back. Obviously, sexual assault is wrong, but when I say like I don't know where the line is drawn from case to case to case. I don't know. I cannot sit here and in good conscience tell people the way that they should behave. I just know that I've about addressing this topic for several reasons. For one thing, because, and to be 100% real, it has made me reflect on my life and things that I've done. And when you said teenager, like I probably was a pushy teenager at sometimes. At the time, it didn't really occur to me what the implications of that could mean. Obviously, the greatest thing about this whole movement is it is causing people to stop and think about it. And when the Louis C.K. thing came out, that was something that I kind of had to reconcile between. This is a comic that I admire. He is a person whose work I really respect. He's not just some other actor. This is a person who I always really looked up to. And it's kind of a similar situation with Aziz Ansari. There are such things as starfuckers, and to say that as a blanket statement would be extremely insensitive. Again, back to the case by case thing. But to pretend like there aren't people out there willing to put themselves into situations to make themselves look like victims so that they could gain something later on down the road is not outside of the realm of possibility. And what you said is shit. I kind of lost what I was getting at, but that there man, it's a landmine of things that you don't want to be misquoted or misinterpreted. But I guess what I want to elaborate on is that there are different shades of gray. This is not a black and white issue. It's not fair to take guy A who smacked a girl on the ass 20 years ago and put him in the same category as Roman Polanski, who 14-year-old girl sodomized a 14-year-old girl and then left to Europe to escape, facing justice for it. It's not fair to put those two people into the same category. And I feel like in a lot of ways, this is a witch hunt because it's the allegations that make the headlines. You throw out Aziz Ansari as a rapist, that's going to get a shitload of clicks. You wait 2 weeks, 2 months when this isn't such a big thing anymore, and you say, it turns out Aziz Ansari had been lied to the whole time. That headline doesn't have the value. It doesn't have that click factor as the other. And that's what's unfortunate is there are seriously people out there that made off-color jokes. Said something like, never trust a bitch anyways because women lie or something stupid. And that's wrong. And I'm not trying to say it's not wrong. But again, it's a lot different from forcing yourself onto a person who is unconscious or unable to fight you off. And when people say that somebody forced them to have oral sex, it's like, did they force you or were you too passive to say you didn't want to do it? Because if I were a girl, right, and somebody said, I'm going to make you suck my dick, I would be like, okay, cool. You're obviously ready to have your dick bitten off. So right on, let's do this. And I think that would be an aversion. So
I'll tell you a personal story of something that I'm getting some weird feedback. Let me fix this. A personal story of mine was I once, when I was single, and this is on the other side because there are awkward sexual encounters from a male's point of view too. I remember I met a girl online when I was in my early 20s. She came over. She wasn't exactly how she portrayed herself in her pictures. We ended up hanging out on the couch because I felt uncomfortable and I didn't really feel any attraction on either a conversational level or a physical level. Well, she started just making out with me. I didn't know what to do. She unzipped my pants. She gave me head. I actually didn't even get hard because I just wasn't into it. And she asked me what was wrong. She was very pushy. We moved to the bedroom. She did it again. I was technically giving nonverbal cues. The first one being I wasn't even being able to perform. It was a pretty big nonverbal cue. We ended up making out. I finally got just hard enough to actually do anything. And we did it. I actually pretended to come in the condom because I just wanted it to be over. And it was very awkward. She left. I was kind of embarrassed. It was kind of weird. But she didn't rape me. She didn't force herself upon me. She didn't even assault me in any way, shape, or form. I was an active participant. And my awkwardness and my regret, I would never want to push that upon someone else because she did nothing wrong in the scenario. If anything, if I was a victim to anything, I was a victim to myself. And I feel like we kind of infantilized people, specifically women. I don't think women are weak creatures. I know women who can speak up and say no and definitely tell you to stop. I've actually known women who have escaped violent sexual assault, who actually have. And so I know women are capable of a lot, and I just don't want to throw someone who didn't read signals or who grabbed a butt in the same category as Roman Polanski, like you said, who drugged and sodomized, I think 13-year-old or whatever from the country. And that's not saying a person who grabs a woman's ass is wrong, right? He's absolutely wrong. Like, pretty much I use the rule, would you want to punch this guy if it was your wife? Yes, if somebody grabbed my wife's ass, I'd want to punch him, or my daughter or whatever. But a guy who grabs someone's ass, a guy who makes a nasty joke, is not the same as someone who forces it. Just like a man who steals something is not the same as a man who murders someone. They're both crimes, they're both wrong, they're both inherently bad, but we don't throw out the same sentence for varying levels of crime. And I feel like this has kind of been a shotgun approach to where it's all bad. And another thing is, I think we've kind of done this thing where we start to demonize men in a certain way and say, like, women are perfect, virtuous creatures. I'm going to tell you one thing. I've met awful, shitty men. I've met awful, shitty women. I've met really good men. I've met really good women. I don't think maybe I have a naive view, but I don't think that people are divided up that much by their gender or their sex, their orientation, any of it. I think people are divided up by the content of the character, and I feel like that's kind of getting thrown out the side. And Aziz, I don't know the guy. He could be a scumbag. He could have assaulted this girl. I don't know. From the evidence that I can see, from the statement I see, I don't really see that. I see a guy who honestly is a creep and maybe deserves to get punched in his face for being too pushy. But I also do think you do need to take some personal responsibility. I would never say that woman who I had that weird sexual encounter with did anything because I participated. I was an active member in that situation. And honestly, I kind of do feel like it's a little hypocritical that all this is coming from Hollywood. Stood and defended Roman Polanski. I mean, you find clips of like Meryl Streep defending Roman Polanski, and that was actual rape. That was like he was convicted and fled the country rape of an underage girl, and you can find that. And I feel like they're only caring now personally because they're forced to care, not because they actually do. That being said, Aziz said he still supports the movement, and I do believe Aziz cares, and I don't think he feels like what he did is part of this movement. I don't know, maybe it was, but I do think there are genuine people. I just have a harder time, especially with the older generation who pretended they didn't know. Like Bryan Singer. Bryan Singer was out molesting kids. I've known that for years. And then now it comes out and people are like, I didn't know. And I'm like, if I knew all the way out in at the time New Mexico, you're going to tell me the people who worked at the studios with him didn't know? I find that a little hard to believe, and so I find this scandal that they've created has turned into one big pat on the back for themselves. And I'm like, well, you're just addressing a scandal that you created. I actually had someone say we don't listen to the NFL about concussions when they're the worst about concussions, and I just felt like that kind of applies here.
Yeah, when you said that to me the other day, it really resonated with me. And then also the fact that like Hollywood and the entertainment industry have essentially made sex a commodity and now are kind of doing the finger wagging. And I did sit and think on that for a little bit. And again, in a patriarchal society, is it Hollywood that perpetuated that, or was it the male producers or things like that that were in charge at the time that helped to create that image? But you're 100% right about people like Meryl Streep. And I've always been, and I'm not a religious person, but I always kind of believe New Testament stuff. And it's like, hey, he who is without sin cast the first stone. And you see all of these people so quick to pass judgment, so quick to finger wag and say, this, you are wrong, and never take a minute to look in the mirror. And I think if there's one positive thing about the Time's Up and the Me First movement is that it forces us to look at ourselves in the mirror. And hey, like maybe you, the viewer, maybe you, the listener, have been on the up and up for your entire life. Maybe you've never made a misstep. Maybe you've never made an off-color joke, or maybe you've never treated a girl in a way that not necessarily objectified her, but just kind of condescended her because she was a woman. And for a long time that was okay. But females, typically speaking, are weaker physically, but that means that has nothing to do with their character and their ability to be able to assert their feelings. But always be skewed, because if some chick was physically trying to rape me, I would just pick her up and fucking chuck her across the room. And women don't typically have that same ability. So I'll never be able to fully understand it. I do know that I've had a very similar experience to what Caleb just now described to you guys. And I also can say that there were times that like I made inappropriate passes at girls in a dance club, that I danced too close to some chick, and I can't say whether it made her uncomfortable or not. But I do think that as long as we're assessing ourselves and we're, can stand behind wherever we do draw that line, I think that that's important. But do you think that when this cycle ends, that people are no longer going to give a shit about it? Or do you think that it's going to stay omnipresent in our culture from now moving forward?
Unfortunately, I feel like it's no one's going to care. I feel like people are already starting to see that, and it's kind of that like cried wolf sort of thing. And I feel like there are legit cases of this, and there is legit sexism. And I mean, I'm a guy. I've probably said things. I definitely have been around some guys who have done some things, and that I definitely wouldn't approve of. I've probably done some things if I really looked in my past that might have been a little disrespectful, but I feel like if we concentrate too much on the smaller stories and everything, if everything is rape, then nothing is rape. And I'm worried that we will overcorrect so much that you're going to get almost an adverse reaction to this. And I feel like politically, that's kind of where our society's in at now. There's this huge outrage culture about everything where everything's some sort of offense. And now we have this huge counter reaction to it, to where everybody's like, well, screw you, I don't care about your feelings at all. And as someone, I kind of want to be somewhere in the middle of both of these extremes. I don't want to necessarily be offended and outraged, because let's be real, we've all said stuff. I don't think there's anyone out there who hasn't said or done something perfect. And perfect example, I mean, Aziz himself has kind of attacked people, and now not attacked but called to justice people. Now it's turned to face him, because to this higher standard than we all realistically hold ourselves to. None of us hold ourselves to the standard, but it's so easy, like you said, to wag your finger at someone else. And I kind of worry that we're going to go so far in that direction that we're going to get a counter movement that is not going to be the prettiest thing. And I don't like seeing counter movements pop up. And it feels like we live in a hugely reactionary culture that is full of counter movements and counter movements, that everybody just gets farther and farther from each other. And I fear that that's going to happen with the Me Too movement. And ultimately, I hope we can salvage the good aspects of this movement, because I do think there are very good aspects. I do think maybe we should think about these things. Maybe I should look at my own sexual encounters and way I've talked to women, and try to figure that out. I do think there's salvageable elements here that we do need to look at. I'm afraid that we're going to kind of get some ridiculous claims and we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater type of deal. And I do want to keep the good movements, but I just worry we're pushing it too far, and we're going to get a very negative counter reaction to this, and it's not going to be pretty. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I hope we only keep the good elements, but I don't picture people caring. A year from now, we're going to have some new. 6 months from now, we're going to have some new outrage that everybody's going to be mad about. There's going to be a new cause, and that's what happens with all these causes. We get outraged, we go take to Twitter, and then nothing really happens, nothing really changes, and it seems like a lot of times lately the changes have come for the worse because of counter reactions.
Yeah, I don't even want to add to that. I think that was such an eloquent way to wrap it up. Man, it's always so fucking good to talk to you, Caleb. It's nice to talk to somebody that's balanced and willing to kind of look at both sides of the picture. We're definitely going to get up and do it again. I want to end this on a high note, and just make sure you guys are following Caleb Says Stuff. You can check him out on YouTube. Obviously, he has a Twitter page. I'll put all of the links and stuff down in the description, but we do appreciate you guys stopping by to have this conversation. Would love to get your input, especially if you're a female. I mean, we can sit here and mansplain all this shit all the time, but it's great to have input from both sides. So I do look forward to hearing from you guys about that. Caleb, anything else before we go?
No, nothing I can think of, but thanks for having me on. It was fun. And like you said, I do agree. I would like to hear some more women views, because I can have my views, but they're exactly that. They're my views. And I'm not opposed to hearing someone else's point of view. I'm not opposed to hearing someone say I'm wrong, and this is why you're wrong, because I can accept that. Yeah, I don't know everything. There is a good chance that I am wrong. There's a very good chance that I'm wrong at all this stuff. But overall, yeah, I think this was a great show. I'm so happy that you had me on. We kind of went all over the board, and that's what I love. This is my favorite type of stuff to do, is just ramble on.
Absolutely. And we're going to try to set something up again soon. And yeah, thank you guys for stopping by to check this episode out. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor, take a second to click that little thumbs up button. It really helps my self-esteem. If you want to support the Patreon, then head over and check out Movies Are Terrible. Your contributions mean a lot. And until next time, peace.